The crystal chandelier above the dining room threw soft light across the long mahogany table, and my father raised his glass of Niagara ice wine with that practiced smile he saved for clients and judges. "To our brilliant Chloe," he announced, voice carrying through the private room at Canoe Restaurant on the 54th floor overlooking Lake Ontario. Top of her class at Osgood Hall. Youngest associate ever made partner track at Blackwood Sterling. Our pride, our future. The 46 guests applauded. Then his eyes slid down the table to where I was sitting, and that smile curdled into something smaller and meaner. "And you, Maeve, still dating that ski instructor from Whistler? Still changing diapers for a living?" The laughter that followed was the kind that sounds like wine glasses breaking. I kept my fork moving through the beet salad on my plate. I did not look up. I did not answer. I just kept eating. The way I had learned to keep eating through 29 years of dinners exactly like this one. And then my boyfriend Wyatt stood up beside me, quiet as a closing door, and the father of my sister's fiancé, a silver-haired man named Gregory MacDonald, who had been watching us from across the table all evening, went completely pale. His wine glass froze halfway to his mouth. He squinted like someone trying to read a sign through fog. And then he said, loud enough that every conversation at that table stopped at once. "Hold on. Hold on. That's you? You're him? My name is Maeve Sullivan. I am 31 years old. I am a registered nurse in the neonatal intensive care unit at the Hospital for Sick Children in Toronto, which we all just call Sick Kids, and I have been one for 9 years. I hold preemies the size of a loaf of bread in the palms of my hands at 3 in the morning, while their mothers sleep at the Ronald McDonald House across the street, exhausted and terrified. I have pressed my thumb against the chest of a baby born at 24 weeks, and felt a heartbeat the size of a hummingbird's come back from the edge of stopping. I make $78,000 a year, which is not nothing in this country, but it is not what my family considers real money either. My older sister Chloe makes 4 times that in her first year out of articling. My father, Desmond Sullivan, is the managing partner at Sullivan, Whitmore and Chen, one of the biggest corporate law firms on Bay Street. My mother Catherine sits on the board of the Royal Ontario Museum and has strong opinions about which fork belongs to which course. And I, their younger daughter, chose the wrong job, and they have never let me forget it. I met Wyatt Harrison on a Tuesday in July at the Street Lawrence Market. I had come down from my shift, still smelling faintly of the lavender lotion we used to soothe the preemies, and I was standing at a vegetable stall, trying to decide between Ontario tomatoes and a pint of wild blueberries from somewhere near Sudbury. Wyatt was working the stall beside it. Apples, honey, jars of maple syrup in those thin glass bottles that look like perfume. He had sunburned forearms and a faded Blue Jays cap, and the kind of hands you get from real work, not a gym. He watched me dither over the tomatoes for probably 3 full minutes before he said, without looking up from the crate he was stacking, "The ones on the left taste better. They got more sun this week." I asked him how he knew. He said, "Because I picked them yesterday morning before it rained." We talked for 45 minutes. I missed the streetcar home twice. He told me he ran a farm up in Prince Edward County, out near Picton, and that he drove down once a week for the market because he liked meeting the people who ate what he grew. He told me his hands hurt in February when the wind came off Lake Ontario. He told me he had once watched a calf be born in a snowstorm, and it was the most religious thing he'd ever experienced. I told him I held dying babies for a living. He didn't flinch the way most people do. He just nodded slowly and said, "That sounds like sacred work." No one had ever called what I did sacred before. My own parents had called it wiping up after people's mistakes. We started seeing each other quietly. Every Saturday, I took the GO train and then a little bus that smelled like diesel and pine trees, and I stayed at his farmhouse outside Picton, and I watched him work, and I learned things. I learned that farming is not a quaint lifestyle. It is a business, with spreadsheets and cash flow and soil samples and arguments with the grain elevator over basis pricing. I learned Wyatt had taken over the operation from his uncle 8 years ago and had doubled the acreage since. I learned he had a degree from the University of Guelph. I learned his accountant called him every Tuesday. I never asked what he made in a year, because in my family that is the only question that actually matters, and I wanted at least one relationship in my life where it wasn't. I knew he owned his farm. I knew he fixed his own truck. I knew he read Alice Munro in the evenings, and had strong feelings about the price of diesel. That was enough. For 2 years, that was enough. My sister got engaged in April to a man named Thomas MacDonald, a private wealth portfolio manager who wore French cuffs to brunch. Thomas's family was old Rosedale money, 3 generations of it, tied up in mining and pipelines back before anyone cared which direction your pipelines went. His father, Gregory MacDonald, was the kind of name that appeared in the Globe and Mail business section in a dignified typeface. My parents were thrilled. My mother began using the word MacDonald in every sentence she spoke to her friends at the tennis club. My father started dropping hints about how a merger between 2 old Ontario families could be very good for everyone involved. The engagement dinner was set for the 3rd weekend in September, at Canoe, because Canoe was the sort of restaurant where the MacDonalds felt comfortable and where my father could point through the window at Lake Ontario and mention his own downtown condo overlooking it. Catherine called me 3 weeks before the dinner. She did not say hello. "Darling, you're bringing the farmer." "I'm bringing Wyatt." "Yes, Maeve." A long sigh. The sigh she had been deploying against me since I was about 11 years old. The MacDonalds are very traditional people, very, shall we say, settled. Thomas's father was educated at Upper Canada College. His mother is a Hennessy, of the Hennessy's. Do you understand what that means? I understand you're telling me my partner of 2 years is not welcome at my sister's engagement. "I'm telling you to dress him," she said. "Something from Harry Rosen, if you can stretch to it. And for God's sake tell him not to talk about livestock. And if anyone asks what he does, perhaps we could say he runs a small agricultural concern." Yes, that sounds better. Small agricultural concern. I told Wyatt about the call that night. He was standing at his kitchen sink rinsing kale, and he listened without saying anything, and when I was done, he just said, "Do you want me to come, Maeve?" "I want you to come," I said. "Then I'll come, and I'll wear a suit. I'm not going to be something I'm not, but I'll wear a suit because you ask me to." I loved him so much in that moment I couldn't speak. The dinner was a Saturday. I drove in from Picton with Wyatt in his old Ford, and he parked it 3 blocks away because he said he didn't want to embarrass me in front of the valets, and that sentence made me want to turn the car around right there. We walked hand in hand through the lobby of the TD Centre, up the elevator to the 54th floor, into the private dining room with its glass walls and its view of the Toronto Islands floating in the blue. My sister Chloe saw us come in and did exactly what she always did, which was to give me a quick, guilty smile, and then look away. My mother kissed the air beside my cheek and inspected Wyatt's suit with the same slow, appraising glance she used on estate auction lots. My father did not get up. He nodded at me across the room and said, "Loud enough for Gregory MacDonald to hear, Maeve." And her friend. Not her boyfriend. Her friend. They sat us at the far end of the table, past the MacDonald cousins, past the aunt from Ottawa, past Thomas's university roommate. There were 2 empty chairs at the actual head of the table beside my parents. My mother had arranged the seating personally. She looked at me across 30 feet of linen and flowers, and gave a small satisfied nod, as though she had contained a problem. The first 2 courses came and went. Cured Arctic char, a sunchoke soup with truffle. My father stood for the toast to the engaged couple, just after the 3rd course arrived, and it was a good toast, warm and paternal, full of the right phrases about family and tradition, and building something that lasts. The MacDonalds nodded. Gregory MacDonald raised his glass. And then my father, still standing, still holding his wine, pivoted at the waist and looked down the long table to where Wyatt and I were sitting. He smiled that smile. And he said the thing I already told you about, the still dating the ski instructor, still changing diapers thing, and the whole table laughed, and I watched the wine in my glass go still. I want to be honest about what happened inside me in that moment. It wasn't rage. Rage would have been simpler. It was something colder, older, a feeling I had been storing since I was 14 years old, and my father had told a dinner guest that Chloe was the smart one and Maeve was the sweet one, said it right in front of me, smiling, as though sweetness were a consolation prize. What I felt at that table was tired, a deep, bone-level tiredness. And underneath the tiredness was a single clear thought, which was, I am never doing this again. Never. This is the last time. But I didn't stand up. I didn't leave. I kept my fork moving. Because here's the thing about being the overlooked daughter. You get very good at not performing your pain for the people who caused it. You learn early that a tantrum is evidence. A tantrum becomes the story. So you sit there, and you chew, and you let the laughter roll past you like weather, and you survive. And then Wyatt put down his napkin and stood up. He didn't say anything at first. He just stood, slow and deliberate, and the movement was so small and so quiet that it took the table about 3 seconds to notice. But the thing about Wyatt is that he fills a room without trying. He's 6'2", and stands like a man who has spent most of his life outdoors, and when he's quiet, people quiet around him. Conversation at our end of the table dropped first. Then the middle. My father, still holding his wine, turned to look. My mother set down her water glass with a small click. And that was when Gregory MacDonald, at the head of the table, squinted through his reading glasses and said, hold on, that's you? You're him? Wyatt looked at him. His face did something complicated. Mr. MacDonald, he said quietly. It's been a while. Harrison. Wyatt Harrison. Gregory MacDonald stood up too, knocking his own chair back slightly. He was staring at Wyatt now like a man trying to solve a puzzle that was rearranging itself in real time. You're the Harrison. From the Harrison Foundation. From Prince Edward County. That's me, Wyatt said. Oh my God. Gregory MacDonald actually laughed, a startled sound. He turned to my father. Desmond, do you have any idea who this young man is? My father's smile had frozen in place. I was told he's a farmer. He is a farmer, Gregory said, and there was a note in his voice now that I had never heard directed at Wyatt before and had only occasionally heard directed at my father. It was the note of respect. He is also the principal donor to the pediatric oncology wing at Kingston General Hospital. He funded the expansion that my wife's sister was treated in last spring. $3.5 million. Anonymous, of course, but I was on the fundraising committee. I saw the papers. The room was very, very quiet now. His family, Gregory went on, and I could see he was enjoying this a little now, enjoying it in the careful way that very wealthy Canadian men enjoy things, which is to say without showing that he was enjoying it. His family sold a group of agricultural technology patents to a Saskatchewan consortium in 2019. I sat on the advisory board for the buyer. The deal was, what was it, 87 million? 89? 84, Wyatt said quietly. After taxes. $84 million, Gregory repeated. For the benefit of the room. And you chose to put most of it into a charitable foundation and go back to farming. My uncle left me the land, Wyatt said. He taught me everything I know. I wasn't going to walk away from it. I looked at Wyatt. He was looking at me. And I realized something, which was that he had never lied to me, not once. He had told me he owned a farm. True. He had told me he grew tomatoes and apples and honey. True. He had never mentioned the patents or the foundation or the $84 million because I had never asked, and because those things were not the parts of himself that he wanted anyone to love first. He had wanted to be loved as Wyatt from Picton who read Alice Munro and whose hands hurt in February. And I had done that. I had loved him as that. And he was looking at me now as if to say, I'm sorry, I didn't know how to tell you without it changing everything, and I was looking back at him as if to say, it doesn't change a single thing that mattered. My mother's face had gone the color of the tablecloth. My father set his wine glass down very carefully. Well, he said, and cleared his throat. Well, Wyatt. I certainly didn't mean any offense earlier. Just a little ribbing between, soon-to-be family members. Wyatt looked at him. He looked at him for a long time. Then he said, very quietly, "Sir, I'm not marrying into your family tonight. Your daughter Chloe is." He turned to Chloe, who was pressing her napkin against her mouth, eyes wet. "Congratulations, Chloe. I mean that sincerely. I hope you and Thomas have a beautiful life." Then he turned back to my father. "But the way you just spoke to the woman I love, in front of 40 people, about a job that saves actual children's actual lives. I'm not going to sit at a table with a man who does that. Maeve, are you ready to go?" I stood up. I stood up slowly and carefully, the way I had watched him stand a few minutes before. I took my cloth napkin off my lap and folded it and placed it next to my plate. I looked at my father. I looked at my mother. And for the first time in probably 15 years, I said the thing I actually felt. "Dad, you don't know me. You've never known me. You decided when I was about 10 years old that I was the lesser one, and you've been decorating that decision ever since. Everything you just said out loud in front of all these people, you've been saying quietly to me my whole life. The only difference tonight is that the room heard you. I hope it was worth it." I didn't wait for a response. Wyatt and I walked the length of the dining room, past the stunned MacDonald cousins, past the aunt from Ottawa who had stopped pretending not to listen, past my sister, who was crying now but did not get up. We got into the elevator. Wyatt pressed the button for the ground floor. The doors closed. He exhaled. "Maeve, I should have told you." "About the money?" "No, you shouldn't have. That was exactly right. That was perfect. I just didn't want." "I know. I know what you didn't want. You didn't want to be a prize. You wanted to be a person." I took his hand. "I love you, Wyatt. I loved you before. I love you now. I would love you if you had $37. Just so we're clear." He laughed, a small broken laugh. "I love you too." The rest unspooled the way those things unspool in a small, gossipy city like Toronto. By Monday morning, 3 of my father's biggest clients had found out what had happened at that dinner. Not the money part, necessarily. The other part. The part where a partner at a major Bay Street firm had publicly humiliated his own daughter, a sick kid's nurse, at a family dinner, in front of a McDonald's. That is the sort of story that travels in the Toronto corporate world at the speed of rumor, which is to say, very fast indeed. By Wednesday, a client my father had held for 19 years, a national retailer whose CEO was apparently the sort of man who had strong feelings about how people treated their children, sent a polite letter terminating the relationship. By Friday, 2 more had followed. By the end of the month, my father had lost about 30% of his book of business, and his partners at Sullivan Whitmore were having the kind of quiet meetings where nobody uses anyone's first name. Gregory MacDonald, it turned out, had been quietly putting the word out. Not dramatically, not with speeches. Just at lunches, at the Albany Club, at the rink at the Granite Club. A sentence here, a raised eyebrow there. That was all it took. My mother called me the following Saturday. She was crying. She said my father wanted to apologize. I said I was working a double shift. She said, "When could we talk?" I said I didn't know. I said the word I should have been saying for 20 years, which was, "Not yet." Chloe called me on a Tuesday. She said she was sorry. She said she had been sorry for a long time, and had never said it. She said she was scared of our father too, in her own way, and she had bought peace with him by being what he wanted, and she understood now that I had been paying the cost of that peace for both of us. She asked if I would be a bridesmaid. I told her I needed some time. I meant it. She said she understood. I think she actually did. My father and I did eventually speak. About 3 months later, in a family therapist's office on Avenue Road, one neither of us had met before, whose only bias was that she charged the same hourly rate as my father's firm, and didn't think much of him. He cried. I won't pretend I didn't feel something when he cried, because I did. He is my father. But I also watched him cry, and I thought, this would not be happening if he still had his biggest client. I am allowed to know that and still choose to sit in the room. Both things can be true. That is what being an adult is. I am writing this from the front porch of Wyatt's farmhouse. Our farmhouse. Now. We got married on a Saturday in June under a white tent in a field of clover, and my sister came, and my mother came, and my father did not come, because he and I are still in the middle of something that might take a few more years to finish, and might never finish at all. I work 3 12-hour shifts a week at Sick Kids, and I drive back to Picton on Saturday mornings. And some nights I hold babies in my hands who weigh less than a loaf of bread. And some nights I stand in a field with Wyatt watching the sun go down behind the barn. And both of those things are my life now, equally. I don't tell people about the foundation. Wyatt runs it quietly. We gave a building to Sick Kids last year, and my name is nowhere on it, and that is how I want it. The work is the point. It has always been the point. My father, the last time I saw him, asked me if I was happy. I told him I was. He asked me if I ever wondered what my life would have looked like if I had gone to law school instead. I told him I had wondered, sometimes, when I was younger. He asked me what the answer was now. And I told him the truth, which is that I think about the 24-week preemie I held through a long November night 3 years ago, whose mother had driven in from Thunder Bay, and hadn't slept in 40 hours, and whose tiny fingers had curled around the edge of my thumb at 3 in the morning, like he was holding on to a rope. I told him that boy is 4 years old now. He walks. He talks. His name is Benjamin, and I told him, my father, the man who once raised a glass in a restaurant overlooking Lake Ontario and called my life small, that I would not trade 1 minute of that November night for every partnership on Bay Street. Not one. And then I got up, and I kissed him on the forehead, because he is still my father and I am still learning how to love him without losing myself. And I walked out to my truck, and I drove home to Wyatt.